Angie Michelle Vera Estrada was 19 years old when a group of criminals took her life. It is said that her end came under the yoke of criminals involved in drug trafficking. It was just a settling of scores due to a deal that went wrong, but the way they did it was brutal. The attack was perpetrated in front of a friend of the victim, Yasmin Hernandez, who was 14 years old and who apparently was also involved in these illegal activities. Considering the facts and the personality of the victim, everything points to her leading a double life of which her mother had no idea. For this reason, the authorities decided to classify her crime as a qualified homicide and not as femicide. A news that aroused the fury of dozens of women, as Michelle herself was known for her active participation in feminist marches and support in raising awareness about the whole wave of gender violence that has disturbed the country for a long time or always. Unfortunately, today, this young woman is part of the heartbreaking statistics.
A judge linked 5 of the 7 people related to her murder to the process. The alleged perpetrators were only charged with crimes against health in the form of drug trafficking and dangerous attacks. None of them were charged with the crime of femicide.
From the limited public information about Michelle Estrada's life, we can say that she was born in Mexico City in the year 2001. She was the second daughter of Marisol Estrada and the younger sister of a male. Later on, another member was added to the family, making the young girl the middle sister. Angie Michelle Vera Estrada was known by her loved ones for her extroverted personality. In the year 2009, she moved with her family to the municipality of Puebla. There, she had a happy childhood and completed her secondary and preparatory studies. One of her biggest dreams was to continue her academic preparation to obtain a degree in psychology or law, the latter being the one that excited her the most, as at her young age, she had already had a kind of encounter with this profession, carrying out small assistant activities in a law firm. Michelle, however, never had self-esteem issues. On the contrary, she always knew herself as someone intelligent and beautiful. Her physical features gave her enough confidence to present herself to the world freely and without hesitation. Going out partying, having romantic dates, and even meeting older men was part of her daily life. She drew attention wherever she went, with her dark, straight hair, thick red lips, brown eyes, penetrating and at the same time, let's say, flirtatious gaze. She walked the streets, showing off her sensuality with her daring attire and sometimes even a bit low-cut. She certainly knew how to exploit that femininity to the fullest, that beauty, this characteristic being one of the main ones that led her to get involved in feminist collectives, wanting to feel like a free woman without having to look around taking care of her back. A smile was all Michelle needed to get what she wanted. However, that mischief had a strong and determined character as its duality. She demonstrated this in every participation in favor of feminism. Without fail, then, every March 8th International Women's Day, she would go out into the streets with her friends to march demanding justice for all the crimes committed against the female gender. She held signs and joined in the chants that have become so popular today. She also expressed herself through her social networks. On her Facebook and Instagram accounts, she used to send messages of support, encouragement, but above all of fear, of being afraid of becoming the next victim of violence or femicide. In fact, on one occasion she wrote,
"I'm tired of having to send license plates, car color, driver's photo, my real-time location in case something happens to me. Of being afraid to leave the house and not knowing if I'll return, I'm afraid of being a woman."
Michelle also shared an image on her social networks. It was her face and some messages around it that resembled a search bulletin. "Have you seen her?" That's what it said in large red letters, as well as the hashtag 81000 as a commemoration of that important day. At that moment, she had no idea, but ironically, she was describing exactly her future, because before her body was located by the authorities, the 19-year-old girl remained missing for about 5 days. In that same post, she took care to notify her contacts that it was just a kind of protest to raise awareness, that fortunately she was completely fine at home. However, it still resembles a quite sinister prediction that unfortunately ended up becoming reality. To stop
the violence against women, unfortunately, she became one more of the statistics. What she wrote on her Facebook became reality and the nightmare of her entire family.
The constant state of alert in which Michelle lived had tangible grounds, especially due to the chilling figures that month after month left the deaths of innocent women, as just in the year 2020, they amounted to 922 femicides, of which 10% had been perpetrated only in Puebla. As if that were not enough, just that year is one of the most alarming in terms of domestic violence, as after the confinement due to this disease we live, the figures skyrocketed, causing fear to increase along with them. Unfortunately, the beginning of the end occurred after the decision to become independent. If she had a history of being a good girl with dreams and aspirations for the future, as I told you at the beginning of this video, the freedom obtained by detaching herself from her family led her down the wrong path. Suddenly, her idea of becoming a lawyer had taken a backseat. Her duality as a party girl and extrovert was leading her down a path where money came very easily, all thanks to that mischievous way of being. Allegedly, her social circle began to fill with people whose influence was not entirely convenient, and especially on April 19th of the year 2020, she told her mother that she would move to a friend's house. Apparently, she was looking for absolute independence, but something very curious that without a doubt must have set off some alarm in the head of Mrs. Marisol was that her daughter refused to give her the exact address. Instead, she only mentioned that it was some address in San Andres Cholula in Puebla. Let's say it's the first red flag. The plan was to share the home with a minor named Jazmin Hernandez, who was only 14 years old, a child. Perhaps she was dragged into a difficult family situation, because from what little is publicly known, the young girl had ties with people, let's say, to be careful with. However, being a minor, there isn't much information that can be shared about her lifestyle. But in the same way, the girls had a pretty solid friendship in which, despite the age difference or years, they understood each other well enough, which I don't see as... I don't find that connection between a 19-year-old lady and a little girl, but well. Everything seems to indicate that they watched each other's backs, kept their secrets, and collaborated on certain activities that in the end, well, did put their lives at risk.
Angie Michelle Vera Estrada was 19 years old, and along with a friend, they disappeared.
She no longer lived with her mom, so she spoke with Michelle on Sunday morning. Then she tries to communicate with her again and can't find her in the afternoon.
Presumably, since they started the new stage of living together, the level of fun exceeded the limits, since without forgetting that both were too young, so much freedom perhaps made them feel invincible. The outings, the parties, the excesses, everything became part of their daily life, and therefore the dangers around them increased. By that time, rumors about Michelle's activities were already circulating strongly among her loved ones. It was said that she and her friend were involved in activities where illicit substances were very relevant, thus obtaining the easy money with which they supported their lifestyle, their outings. The first suspicion that something was not right came from the Hernandez Mota family, who reported the disappearance of the teenager Jazmin, whose whereabouts had been unknown for several days when she was last seen in an area of clubs and bars. As for her companion, her search began on July 16th, with social media being the first means to spread her face with the phrase "wanted." The last connection that had been made with her was a daughter who was apparently going to travel to Acapulco with some friends. However, since these messages were sent on July 12th, nothing more was known about her. Unfortunately, Information about her and her friend was last seen in the same bar area in San Andres Cholula, accompanied by two unknown individuals with whom they left the area.
On July 16th at 1840 hours, an investigation file was initiated in the Special Prosecutor's Office for the investigation of missing persons for the non-location of the young woman Michelle N. due to the complaint filed by her mother.
And it was on July 13th when the discovery of a lifeless female body alarmed police officers and members of the Forensic Medical Service. It was located in San Nicolas de los Ranchos municipality in the state of Puebla. Until July 16th, it had not been identified. However, with the commotion caused by Michelle's disappearance, it only took a comparison for them to realize that it was the same person. The truth was that the now deceased had been killed so quickly and nothing was known about her anymore, and in a quite disturbing way, as the body showed clear signs of aggression, such as blows, bruises, and a wound on the neck from a sharp weapon. Once the victim's relatives came to identify the body, they received the news that the cause of her passing was that her breathing had been cut off, leaving them, imagine, with deep pain and a feeling of helplessness. And it was no secret that perhaps the young girl was on the wrong path. However, an end like the one she suffered was undoubtedly an injustice and a very devastating tragedy for the family.
The truth is that justice should be served, right? To clarify the situation and see what really happened and go as far as it needs to go. He was 19 years old, wasn't he? So no, we don't think it's fair.
Since Michelle's body wasn't the only one found at the scene, it was thought that her friend Jasmine too
had run
into the same fate. However, until that moment, the remains were not identified, of which it could only be assured that it was a female body. In the midst of this situation, the authorities could not stop the search for the 14-year-old girl because until the identity of the body, the lifeless body, was confirmed, they had to assume that she was still alive, although the news that it was her began to spread mistakenly.
The family itself would have confirmed that her friend's body was with her, of whom no further details are known. With Michelle's death, there have already been over 60 femicides so far this year within Puebla territory.
The common sense of Michelle's relatives led them to mistakenly believe that this body was Yasmin's, especially due to the fact that they disappeared together and were seen in the same area practically on the same day at a similar time. However, what happened next opened the way to another piece of the puzzle. But the truth was that she was very scared because of what she had to witness as they took the life of her friend. On July 18th, finally, Miss Yasmin made her appearance. She was at the Hidalgo market, visibly disturbed, as I was telling you. There, in fact, some say she contacted her mother, while other rumors suggest that she called Mrs. Marisol, Michelle's mother. However, whatever the truth was, the message was the same. He recounted how he saw a group of people beat up, made a 19-year-old suffer. They had slit the throat of his 19-year-old. They had slit her friend's throat in front of her, and she was finally ready to give her testimony. The Puebla prosecutor's office was quickly notified to proceed with the investigation. Authority personnel arrived at the Hidalgo market to safeguard the minor and transport her to their offices where she would be interrogated. By the way, two versions emerged from this event. In one, the first, it is said that the two young women were forcibly taken to a residence in San Andres Cholula, where the alleged captors were only looking to rob them of their cell phones. And when Michelle showed resistance, the criminals did not hesitate to start hurting her, until one of them pulled out the knife with which he stabbed the girl. This story on one hand, but on the other hand, I tell you, there is version number 2 about the settling of accounts from a business deal that went wrong. Not for nothing was femicide dismissed as a crime and it was investigated as homicide, which, although there is very little data on what really happened with Yasmin Hernandez, it is known that she provided enough information for the authorities to fully identify the people who, in this
unfortunate full identification of the people who participated in this unfortunate event. Several of them have already been arrested and are currently in the legal processing that we must carry out to proceed legally against these individuals.
Despite reservations about the investigation information, which was advancing by leaps and bounds, it became publicly known that thanks to certain contacts, a journalist was able to access confidential data, which revealed somewhat very disturbing details. Well, according to a journalistic note published in a local media outlet, both women did have contact with people to be wary of, specifically Jasmine. She had been living for a month with a man involved in shady business. His name was Juan Carlos N., although he also responded to the nicknames of the Jackal or the Greek. This man was involved in illicit activities involving narcotics. In addition, he operated in almost all of the San Andres sector where Michelle moved, and they gradually began to get closer, not only through a friendship but as partners, as it is very likely that this man would have talked to them about a very simple way to make money easy and fast. However, it was not about some entrepreneurial alliance but a crime, with transactions involving a substance known as crystal. But I repeat to you again, this is not safe, it's probable. So, being so young and naive, both Michelle and Jasmine thought they had found the business of their lives. In addition, they had this image of good girls incapable of breaking the law. They were good-looking, outgoing, and their lifestyle full of parties and many known people gave them the plus they needed to hook their clients. It is believed that Juan Carlos was the link between them and the rest of the criminal group. Dangerous people with whom you should not get on the wrong side. You know what kind of people I'm referring to, which most likely happened after a transaction that did not go as it should, thus arousing the anger and annoyance of these people. And although the Greek was one of the main suspects in this event, he remained a fugitive from justice for a while after having fled, leaving the rest of the band with all the responsibility to which both men and women belonged. Once the arrests were carried out, the authorities proceeded to make public the names of these suspects, Mr. Lorenzo, Mrs. Guadalupe, as well as a subject named Brandon, a girl named Alejandra, Fernando, Maria Fernanda, Ivan Agustin, and the young Samantha. From this list of people, it is said that the one identified as Ivan Agustin had a romantic link with Michelle. And as if that were not enough, the alarming number of accomplices was still not complete, because a few days later, another list came out whose arrests were related to the crime against the young Angie Michelle. This time it was Juan Carlos, another nicknamed the Argentine, and 2 more women.
A control judge linked 8 people to the process for the case of Angie Michelle Vera, although not for the crime of femicide. The above was determined during a hearing held in the last hours at the Puebla House of Justice, where he did not detail why he will only investigate for qualified homicide Guadalupe, Fernando, Alejandra, Brandon, Samantha, Lorenzo, Maria, and Ivan Agustin, who was supposedly the victim's boyfriend. Meanwhile, the judicial authority granted a 6-month period for the closure of the supplementary investigation, so the 8 defendants will remain imprisoned in San Miguel until sentencing. It should also be remembered that last weekend he sent Carlos, alias El Chacal, from the case, who was initially pointed out as the material author. The man is currently in prison for damaging health and will be released in the coming months.
Cause, especially because it was not cause, especially because the case would not be handled as femicide, even when the victim's partner was involved. The truth is that all the information that was made public came in dribs and drabs. This was because the investigations were practically being carried out behind closed doors. However, this same lack of data caused feminist groups to speak out in the streets. Justice for Michelle signs were quickly made, as the public was outraged that her death had been classified as a homicide. This considering the difference in years of sentence in case each of the accused were found guilty. And on the other hand, from the outside, everything seemed like an injustice, and although it was, things had not exactly happened as people believed. And it's that Michelle and her friend were playing with fire by associating with people involved in drug dealing. When things went wrong, the boyfriend of the 19-year-old girl showed his true intentions. That is, what he felt for his partner was not stronger than the business. If there had been losses, they had to be settled. Presumably, Ivan persuaded his partner to go with him to a residence where they would meet with the rest of the traffickers. But the girl had no idea that this was not another business where she could make some easy money, but it was the consequence of not taking good care of the merchandise. These people were there for nothing more and nothing less than to teach her a lesson. Apparently, large amounts of crystal had been lost because of her, and when she decided to attend the meeting, she was just falling for her boyfriend's tricks. She was heading straight to the slaughterhouse. And that's how these two women were in front of a whole group of criminals. Although the real target was the older girl, and apparently the one identified as Guadalupe was the first to show violence, paving the way for the beating she finally received. And that's how things escalated to the point of no return. The attack was so brutal that it claimed the life of the young woman. She was suffocated and they practically removed the upper part. Then the perpetrators took her body to wrap it in a sheet and thus move it to an abandoned place in the municipality of San Nicolas de los Ranchos, where the next day it was located by authorities, but not immediately identified. Since then, the investigations focused on the arrested people. However, not everyone received the deserved punishment because it was said that on the 14th of March of the year 2023, 4 of the women involved, Samantha, Maria Fernanda, Guadalupe, and Alejandra, had to be acquitted of the crime due to lack of evidence against them. On the other hand, in the case of the accused individuals, it was completely different because on the 10th of April of the year 2023, Lorenzo, Ivan, Brandon, and Fernando turned out to be guilty of the crime, being sentenced to 26 years in prison. And as for Jasmine, as I had told you before, almost nothing is known about her whereabouts since she is a minor. Her data and all her information must remain under lock and key for this very reason.
And unfortunately, the case of these young girls is not isolated, as it is estimated that around 75,000 minors are involved in illicit activities related to local drug sales.
Without a doubt, it is a situation that requires strict attention from the authorities. And although Miss Yasmin was lucky and was able to come out alive from that nightmare, the trauma of having seen her friend's life taken away will unfortunately accompany her for the rest of her days. Remember that there are 2 YouTube channels. There's Pepe Misterio and many more mysteries. The interviews are uploaded on Mondays on Pepe Misterio, and if you have a story that you would like to tell, you can send it to me by email at correopepemisterio.com.mx. Or if not, you can write to me on Instagram, where you can find me as Pepe Misterio Mix.